the month of February to launch our Public Service Innovation Funding Call for 2021. My name is Breda O'Brien and I lead the Public Service Innovation team in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. As you know, or most of you know, our team is a seconded team from all sectors of the public service. I myself is seconded from the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. I'm going to pass over to my colleagues now in the innovation team to introduce themselves. So maybe Vinny, do you want to go first?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Vinny Lanigan. I'm seconded in from the Department of Defence and the Defence Forces, and I'm looking after the Innovation Network and the Innovation Conference. It's unlikely that we might get to meet this year, but please God, towards the end of the year we might. And in lieu of that, we've run a number of inspiring ideas webinar series. Last year it was kind of more on Fridays around the same time, and this year we'll have 3 on Thursdays. So it'd be great if you'd let us know maybe in the chat function here or via email if these times or dates suit you, because obviously it'd be ideal if we would get the most amount of people accessing these calls. So it'd be great if you could let us know.
Thanks, Vinny. And maybe Anne, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Anne Broders. I'm currently on secondment from Enterprise Ireland. My background is grant management. I'm a qualified accountant. And if anybody here is applying for any of the funding that's being launched today, I'll be a very close contact point for you when it comes to the payment and the contracts. So I'll be hassling you then. But at the moment, we probably don't know each other so well. Nice to meet you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. And Catherine?
Hello, I'm Catherine Matters. I'm on secondment from Wexford County Council, where I've worked in libraries in Wexford and Kilkenny County Council as well. And yeah, so I'm working on the fund mainly and also doing a lot of work on the comms. And so we have the application form all up and ready and really looking forward to getting all of the applications in. Looking forward to getting them. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And Dean?
Hi all, I'm Dean Reid. I am seconded from Department of Justice and Equality, and I help out with running the Innovation Fund. I also help out with the network events as much as I can. I also manage the Innovation and Collaboration Forum, so if anyone hasn't joined up, please do. Really hoping to kind of improve that this year and get more people joining in the conversation, so please join up. I also help and process all the payments for the Innovation Fund, so looking forward to launching this year and getting to read all the interesting innovation projects that come about. Really looking forward to that, and then also we'll help out with all the day-to-day stuff that kind of pop up. That's me.
As Dean always says, he's the glue that sticks us all together and keeps the show on the road. So we're delighted to have a fantastic lineup of speakers. Our speakers today were successful in last year's call and they come from a range of different sectors. And so we're really delighted that they were available and willing to come on board. As Vinny outlined, we have a chat function. So please pop in any questions you have. If you're new to the fund and haven't heard about it, just pop questions you may have in there. If you're a reoccurring applicant, again, if you've any questions about this new call, there's a few changes that I'll outline in a moment. But what's great today is that we have some really great stories of different kinds of innovation to showcase from across the public service. And our very kind and generous colleagues will outline their experiences, the fund, the process, innovating in a COVID pandemic climate, because you might recall that the fund call actually opened last year before the pandemic and the lockdowns happened. So they all then still managed to deliver their project in addition to all of those extra duties. So, but we're delighted to have them on board. But what I might do first now is just present on this year's call, give you a quick overview and point you in the direction of where you'll find more information, and also maybe some helpful hints about the types of projects that we're looking to support. So just bear with me while I share my presentation. Any second now. Okay, I think we're good to go. Vinny, give me a thumbs up.
Perfect.
Yeah, great. Okay, so The call is now open, and the most important thing I guess you need to know first of all is the closing date. So it's Wednesday the 24th of February at 12 noon. Okay, as Catherine outlined, and she's been doing fantastic work in the background, we have an online form similar to last year's form, so you must apply online. If you are indeed having technical issues, in the first instance perhaps talk to your IT units, and then if you are still having difficulties with that, you can contact us at innovation@per.gov.ie. So just put that date in your diaries, and 12 noon, very important. So what is the Innovation Fund? For those who've joined us that haven't heard about this before. So we're in our third year. We established it in 2019, myself and the team here that you see. So we established the fund. It's an initiative to deepen an innovation culture in the public service. And we aim to support ideas and projects, innovation projects, that wouldn't normally be funded. So new projects. The definition we use of innovation in DEEPR and in the new strategy that colleagues worked on and recently launched in November last year, which is also available on our website, Making Innovation Real, is innovation is new, a new way of doing things that delivers value. So it's a new and viable offering that creates value. So it can be new to your organization. It doesn't need to be new to the world or even new to your sector. It could be happening in another jurisdiction, for example. And many of the colleagues that will talk later about their own experiences will maybe talk about the motivation or the ideas and how they came across their ideas, which might be helpful in terms of trying to find inspiration. But the essence of it, though, is it can't just be an idea. It has to be in its application, it has to create value. So whether it's for the citizen, whether it's for the organization itself in terms of efficiencies that are created, or whether it's new processes that are put in place or new technologies that are adopted. But the idea is that it's a new and viable offering that creates that value piece at the end. So as I said, it's a key initiative to promote innovation culture, and myself and the team were brought together to develop a range of initiatives such as the Innovation Network, which now boasts over 850 members, and Innovation Week that I think Vinny mentioned as well. So to date, we've funded over 52 projects to the tune of about 1.5 million. Interestingly, just totting up the applications received over the 2 years, it's been well over 500 applications. And for instance, last year, we were only able to fund 9% of the projects received. So it is incredibly highly competitive. We know that can be a challenge to people, putting a lot of effort in. But many organizations actually who maybe weren't successful last year, what we believe is they went on and used the application as a business case to their own organizations. And many were successful in realizing their project in that way. But unfortunately, we just don't have infinite amount of money to spend. But it just is important to know that it's a highly competitive fund. So in 2019, we funded, so this is the pilot, and we started mid-year in 2019. We had 18 projects funded, just over 500,000, 140 applications in all sectors funded. In 2020, this almost doubled, 34 projects. Again, all sectors were funded, and 364 applications requesting over 15.4 million. And you can see huge increase in applications. Obviously, we've done a lot in terms of communications in that period, and it jumped 168% increase in applications over the pilot year. And as I said earlier, 9% of the applications were funding. So this is a picture of what we imagine those who've never heard of the fund are kind of going, well, gosh, where do I start? So we have a set of guidelines. Hopefully, we think they're helpful. Hopefully they are, and they're available there at ops2020.gov.ie/funding. And that's what they look like. And there you'll find a very in-depth, detailed breakdown of the criteria involved, and it breaks down into the types of projects in terms of, well, the value, what does that mean? And there's quite a list of bullets under each criteria area. So that's a really good place to start if you're new to the fund, or if you're a repeat applicant, because there has been some changes, as I mentioned earlier. So important features for the 2021 call. The funding awards now will range from 25,000 up to a maximum of 60,000. Our experience of running the fund for 2 years has sort of informed this change. I suppose in terms of the ceiling, we believe that it's quite challenging to spend a considerable more amount of money in a limited period of time. We had that sort of loose option of going up to 100 grand. We hadn't actually quite funded that amount for one singular project, but we've removed that because we just don't feel it's sort of realistic on top of everyone's day job. In terms of the shift up to 25,000, it's a small shift up, but it's a shift nonetheless. And it's because what we're seeing on the ground is, and hopefully as a result of the work that's happening here in Deeper to try and influence this innovation culture, but many organizations are now producing their own innovation budgets, and so we believe those budgets are sort of allowing for that smaller pilot to be funded. So we're slowly shifting towards funding slightly larger pilots or proof of concept projects. It's really important to say as well that, you know, if your project is large, you can apply to fund maybe the start of that project or a middle part or whatever. You don't have to put in an application for the entire project. So it might be the proof of concept phase or demonstration phase or scaling phase. So you'll see that outlined in the funding guidelines. Importantly this year, for those who are familiar with the fund and have applied before and been successful, this year there will be no pre-funding of the grant awards. So funding will only be provided on the basis of vouched expenditure and milestones and deliverables achieved. So in essence, what we used to do was if a particular organisation was successful and they were successful to the tune of 20,000, for example, a portion of that award would have been made available straight away to them. So for this year, what we're trying out is no, we're going to just provide funding in the base of vouched expenditure. So the organisations who are successful will use their own organisational funding to commence the project, and there'll be an opportunity on the 14th of July, the first reporting deadline, to provide any vouched expenditure that has been accumulated to that point, and that sort of first batch of monies can be or portion of the award can be claimed at that point. The project then has to be finished in its entirety. The project that's been described and agreed between us in Deeper and the organisation successful. We have a memorandum of agreement that we sign with both organisations, and the project has to be finished according to the agreed deliverables in that MOA by the 15th of November, because of all funding needs to be claimed and drawn down before the end of the year, of course, because we run an annual budgetary cycle. So I hope that's clear. I'll make these slides available online later, and all the details in the guidelines anyhow, but it might be useful to have the slides. So getting to the criteria, this is incredibly important when you're thinking about your application and where to put your priority information. So you'll see there it's quite clearly laid out, and this is all just taken exactly from the guidelines. The criteria is novelty, which is innovation. Is this new to your organization? And again, there's much more detail I'll follow through now in a moment. That's 30 marks. The value, outcomes, and user impact. So what was the impact of this innovation? And that's also 30 marks. They're the two largest areas for gaining points. Then the next four are all equal marks of 10. So is the innovation transferable, scalable, and will learning be shared between organizations? Collaboration with other organizations. Have you worked within other sections of your organization or other departments or other organizations within your sector, or even outside of your sector? Is there an evidence base for your application? So just so this is clear, obviously this will depend on the particular project, but for instance, if something's completely brand new, you're not going to have an evidence base to show its impact, for example, but the evidence base might be on the basis of the problem you have identified. So for instance, you might say that currently the situation to process a particular application takes X amount of time, X amount of employees over whatever, and the introduction of maybe a particular technology or automation, there can be an estimate of the improvement generated from that technology, for example. So it's not necessarily about the projected or final outcome and evidence of that, because sometimes you just don't know, but it might be more about the evidence of the problem that exists. Or the improvement opportunity. And then finally, procurement plan and contribution. So just to be very clear, procurement plan is for us. So ourselves in the team, the first stage evaluators, and also the final stage evaluation, we need to be convinced that you can do the project and do it within the year. It's really important that the money can be drawn down and spent, because we are in an annual budgetary cycle, and we want to support projects that are ready to get going and do the project. So by showing us what your plan is in terms of if there's a procurement element or how you plan to spend the money, that really convinces the evaluators and the team that you're ready to go. And the contribution of the recipient organisation, in some cases it can be match funding. In other cases it can simply be, well, I'm assigning X amount of staff to work on this X proportion of the time, and that shows the commitment. So essentially what, again, the evaluation team need to see is that there is that commitment from your organisation at the senior level to this project and to roll it out. It eliminates the risk for us, essentially. We're trying to put together a portfolio of projects that will have the biggest impact, and looking at that, we need to be convinced that you can do this and that there's buy-in from your senior leaders. So just generally, and just quickly, I've gone way over already, so I'll try and fly through this really quickly, but again, I'll make these slides available. This is just generally kind of what we're looking for. So projects that help add value to your organisation and make what you do better, or improve the processes, create efficiencies, gives the user a better experience, gives the public a better experience, or the business that maybe you prepare grants for example. It might be a new way to deliver your organization's strategic plans. It might be to implement approaches that can be spread elsewhere to create learnings for their organizations in the public service. So we've seen that a lot over our term here in the public service innovation team, where we've connected colleagues who are doing something in one area that can be easily transferred, and you wouldn't have initially thought the transferability between sectors, but there's huge scope. And again, as I mentioned, use the evidence, insights and data to drive innovation, to seek to create evidence for future innovations. So drilling down then, again, you'll see all this, it'll be available to you, but 30 points are for this part, the value, outcomes and user impact. So again, is there a reduction by doing your innovation? Will there be a reduction in the time burden or expense for the public? Will there be increased efficiencies or a reduction in costs for your organization? Will your innovation create a streamlined and more accessible way of communicating with the public, for example? Will there be a simplified and more intuitive service or product that prevents queries and unnecessary follow-up? That once and done type thing of helping the public in terms of accessing public services. And ultimately, will there be a better experience for the staff providing the service? Because innovation isn't just about the public services that we create. It can also be about staff retention and attracting talent. The other big one, again, 30 marks for this, is novelties. This essentially, is it innovative? Is it new to your organization? So it doesn't have to be also invention, which can often be conflated. Obviously, we'd welcome invention if that was the case, but often, we call it stealing with pride. If, say, an organization in Denmark, a similar your counter organization over in Denmark is using a particular thing, that's stealing with pride. It's perfectly reasonable, and you can also learn from their implementation and even improve it further. So look abroad and look within the sectors in Ireland and try and find inspiration there. But invite experimentation, testing and iteration. That's really important in terms of innovation. What we really promote is trying something small, learning from it, iterating before going big with a particular initiative. In adopting different approaches to create policy. So are you engaging with your does your innovation talk about engaging with your users in a different way? And we've a really interesting project that covers that from our policing authority colleagues coming up shortly. And are you proposing to look at new and emerging technologies? Our colleagues in Deeper with the OGP have developed, for example, a framework for robotic process automation. And another one of our colleagues today will talk about how they used that framework for their project in the local sector, local authority sector. So again, these are just the 10-mark ones. I won't go into them too much because I've gone way over, but is the innovation transferable? Can it be scaled, and can learnings be generated? Is there collaboration? There's 10 marks for that. If there's collaboration with other organizations, and the evidence base is also 10 marks. The procurement plan and contribution, I think I discussed that sufficiently earlier, but essentially shows that commitment and also convince us that you can do it in time, do the project in time. So just to say good luck to those applying. We're available at innovation@per.gov.ie, and myself, Vinny, Anne, and Dean and Catherine. So just pick up the phone or email us, and we'll help you if you have any questions about the form. I should say, obviously, put your questions for now in the chat function that you'll see there on the right-hand side of your screen. And there is the website, so you can download the guidelines. That's a first step that we would advise. And then on foot of that, if you have questions or queries, do get in touch. So I'll just stop sharing and introduce our first guest. I'm delighted to introduce, this is a very heartwarming project to start off with. It was certainly an evaluator's favourite last year. So first up, I'm delighted to introduce Niamh Murphy. Niamh is a senior neonatal dietitian at University Maternity Hospital in Limerick, and her project aims to support the use of IT in the generation of safe and optimal nutrition plans for preterm and critically unwell infants and children. And this project is a partnership between UL Hospitals and CHI at Crumlin. So you're very welcome, Niamh.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? I assume that's a yes.
Yes, sorry. Yep.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Vinny. Breda, thanks so much for that introduction. And thanks again for everyone for this opportunity to showcase really, I suppose, what a difference being successful in this fund really can achieve. So as I mentioned, I'm Niamh. I'm a neonatal dietitian at University Maternity Hospital Limerick. And I'm going to present my project, which specialises on helping preterm babies and critically ill children to grow. As similar to what Breda had mentioned, if you have any queries throughout the presentation, just pop them in the question box. So I suppose my idea came from working in the neonatal ICU every day, where we see preterm babies, and some can weigh as little as 401 grams and come as early as 22 weeks. These babies, they need intensive support within minutes of life in order to survive and to grow. A team of neonatal specialists work together to optimise this growth. We base our care from the international evidence-based guidelines, which highlights specific nutrients that each baby needs to grow. In the neonatal unit in Limerick, complex calculations are done every day by hand by this team to place the best course of nutrition for these babies. If the feeding route happens to change, we need to recalculate these calculations. If the weight changes, we need to recalculate. If solutions available change, we need to recalculate. In scenarios, I suppose, where timing really is quite critical and resources can be quite limited, it can take more than 45 minutes per baby when a subject per baby to do the calculations, and I suppose this is subjective to human error and miscalculation at times. A common output from this process is a prescription of IV nutrition solution. This prescription must be with the pharmacy by 10:30 every morning. So as you can imagine, this is quite a stressful process as we start work at 8 o'clock. A possible solution. Well, what if you could have a solution to all these problems, something that you could crunch the numbers for you, you'd be confident with, you'd enhance your speed, your accuracy, the quality of the service, that you can spend more time than directly caring for the baby? What if you could have something that contains educational prompts based on evidence-based guidelines? It could mean a less opportunity for error and a better awareness of nutrition for all the neonatal team members, and as well to optimize the growth, the main priority. So having secured the funding, my next step was then to set up a network and project plan. First, I mapped the project. I used resources from HSC-led Project Management Hub and linked up with Health Innovation Hub Ireland, which are a great support. With the support of the UL Hospital senior management team, I set out some key milestones and Gantt chart as well. I looked at various alternative solutions as well as similar ones, both nationally and internationally, held focus groups with nutrition teams, reached out to developers and designers across the globe. To be fair, Twitter really is excellent. People are very, very helpful once you ask them. In speaking with Children's Health Ireland at Crumlin Dietetics Department, I met Emma Gentles, a senior dietitian who worked in pediatric ICU for older children. It was great to hear of similar frustrations that she might have and also what different solutions she was using. Another colleague, Trace Dunn, in pediatric diabetes at UHL, also had very similar issues. I decided, as our problems were the same, to combine our interests and extend the scope to not only supporting critically ill preterm babies, but also critically ill infants and children. We decided to partner, and thus PN Plus, Pediatric Nutrition Plus, was born. At this point, I'd just like to note that it was advised to purchase the .ie domain. Initially, on application, we had a different name for our project, but that was copyrighted somewhere else. So I would take maybe a little top tip is to clarify the name and to make sure that your .ie domain isn't taken. I really think that the network expansion helped the success of this project. It brought with it lots of key stakeholders and lots of differing opinions, not only from UL hospitals, but also the clinical staff within CHI as well. Having successfully, I suppose, mapped out what we're going to do, and we secured our 18. We finalized the design of what we wanted. We created and coded Excel sheets for preterm, for infants, and for children, different weight categories. Taking information from the literature, we designed educational prompts and support information for the user, as well as mapping out a suggested throughput, so what the user sees when they first and how they go through each screen. At the same time, I wanted to evaluate the evidence. What is in practice? What's the insight of those working in UL and CHI neonatal and pediatric ICUs? I know that my design team found it for the environment stressful, but what did everyone else think? In order to hire the necessary services, I had to stage formal procurement. All quotations were below the threshold, so less than 25,000. Therefore, this involved sharing a brief spec, receiving quotations, and subjectively evaluating the best fit. The biggest hurdle, and to be fair, the most expensive, was the software development scope. I found that the translation of our concepts to engage software developers at the right pitch was difficult. In speaking, I suppose, we speak pediatric medicine language, the software developers speak code, very different. This was initially a struggle to be confident that we translated the project to a sufficient level that be able to give an accurate quote, and also that we chose the best developer for the job. Some friends of mine suggested generating a wireframe. So I used Balsamic Cloud, which has a 30-day free trial, ideal. It's basically like Microsoft Paint for coding. You can translate your mental visions onto pages that developers can understand and visualize the work that it represents. This was commented to be a very useful tool by lots of the developers. Developers were also offered additional opportunity for meetings and extra information as required. After the final quotation was received, senior management at CHI and UL hospitals assisted with the scoring. A developer, Appiarcon, was chosen, and it was becoming very real. As we all know, I suppose in order to secure any work within any company, a legal contract must be drawn up. And this project was not in any way different. UL Hospital CEO granted permission to use CKT, the legal team, supporting UL hospitals for this project and absorb the costs. A service level agreement between the developers and the hospital needed to be drawn up. However, as our team was a partnership between CHI and UL hospitals, it needed to be drawn up and agreed by both hospital executive boards. At the peak of COVID-19, you can imagine the hospital executive boards might have more pressing matters. However, we persisted. Legal teams representing each hospitals worked together to agree on and disagree on and agree on and disagree on again 3 documents. In the end, we finalized and signed a service level agreement between the hospital and the developer, also also intellectual property agreements between UL hospitals and CHI at Crumlin for PN plus ownership, and an end user license agreement to accompany the consent for the user to use the software. I also carried out data protection impact assessment to protect the data of the patients that would be inputted into the application. This was reviewed for both UL hospitals and CHI at Crumlin. In terms of ethics, Quality and Research Committee were involved and approached to seek ethical approval to conduct our research project, which we are running in tangent with the software development. And in terms of regulation, due to the nature of the software that we were building, it was referenced as a clinical aid. We needed robust clarification on the current status of our application, which will then help us to support a further application, which we were doing towards the end of the project with the HPRA. It was just at this point that development finally started. While development was underway, as I said, we didn't put our feet up. The research assistant we hired was gaining momentum in developing our staff questionnaire. As a team, together we mapped out the stages of our research project. We wanted to audit general insight of staff working in the paediatric and neonatal settings on their knowledge, practice, and ordering of IV nutrition solutions. We collected anonymous data over 4 weeks using online questionnaires for doctors, nurses, dietitians, and pharmacists. The results speak for themselves. 96% of respondents noted that IV nutrition ordering was part of their daily job. 61% reported not having enough time to check the order that they're making was achieving optimal nutrition for that child. All the doctors noted calculating optimal amounts of nutrition to order safely as a greater than normal challenge and had to rely on other healthcare professionals such as pharmacists and dietitians. For the nutrition specialists, the dietitians, 47.8% reported high patient caseloads and limited time to make the order for the main reason they couldn't optimize their IV nutrition order. Therefore, it showed that it needs extra educational resources and it needs some form of a solution to address the time-sensitive nature of IV nutrition management. Could technology possibly help? Of note, we've also written up this abstract, and we are going to be presenting it at the Irish Nutrition and Dietetics Research Symposium later this year. So, where are we now? We are in the certification phase. We're waiting clarity on its classification as a medical device or a clinical aid. Once we certify, we'll be piloting it at UL hospitals and CHI, and we will be repeating our research to measure any change. But what does it actually look like? Here you can see that from a app on your phone, you can click into this, which can be available as well on a tablet for the computer, but also as well on a URL site. You can click in and you can select your patient. You can select if they're term or if they're preterm. You can select male or female. Then you scroll down and you identify their date of birth, and then you pop in their weight. So this individual here is 2.3 kilos. Then you can decide, okay, well, what would I like to do? I'd like to plan my IP nutrition. So you can see here that available fluids, the user can put in the amount of fluids that's available. They can put in the amount of fluids that are available. They can use little educational prompts to guide the fluids, checking if they're right. They can choose the amount of amino acids for brain growth. They can check if they're right within the guidelines. They can then put in the amount of glucose to support also brain and tissue development. And again, they can cross-check the guidelines. And then if it's a thing that they put in an error, they get an error code to say, you're outside the guidelines, maybe you'd like to look at it again. Then they can amend that. Throughout the whole process, you can also add in additional supports, such as the amount of sodium, potassium, magnesium, phosphate, everything that is standard for children. And then you can print your TPN order, and then you can push it to pharmacy. So I suppose a process which originally took, originally would have taken approximately 45 minutes, has now been reduced to less than 5 minutes. So it's 9 times faster than the manual input. Overall, I'd really like to thank all of these people on the list. It's not exhaustive. There's surely someone that I've missed, but I can guarantee that this would not have come to fruition if we didn't get the support of the Public Service Innovation Fund. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Niamh. What a wonderful presentation. I think we were getting a little bit of feedback on your line, unfortunately, but I think it was clear nonetheless. I think Niamh really has outlined some interesting points, particularly around the communication with the potential providers and how important that is. Like we all know, public service procurement it can be challenging and it can be nerve-wracking, and we want to stick within the rules and all of that, but engaging with providers in a different way and making sure that you're speaking the same language and you're working towards the same goal is incredibly important. And very interesting to see that not only in Niamh's project did she manage to create time efficiency, but also the value that was created for the patients and for the babies in terms of, you know, better nutrition ultimately at the end of the day. So, and obviously Niamh works in a hospital. I would assume that's what all that beeping was about, and very in demand. So Niamh was managing to do her project despite you know, COVID and everything like that. So, and really thanks so much for taking the time out. We have a colleague also from the Department of Health here as well, and we know obviously are not the only people affected by COVID and whatever in the public service, but especially thanks to you guys. So I know there's a few questions about the chat function. Kira has a question about the Q&A box. We can see the questions, Kira, and at the end we will come to those questions in a block. And yeah, I think, is that it in terms of the questions? Okay, so without further ado, I want to move on to our good friend of OPS, Eddie O'Loughlin, who is the PMO manager in the LGMA, and his project applied robotic process automation to handle core HR exceptions, using a cloud-based robotic service to automate the update of core HR time and attendance system to record agile working days. You're very welcome, Eddie.
Thanks very much, Breda, and look, thanks for inviting me here today. And I suppose before I start, fantastic presentation in the last project. It was great project. So well done on that. Look, thanks for calling me today. I'm the PMO manager in the LGMA, and I suppose the project we looked at, and it came from, or was born from, a long-standing interest in robotics process automation within the LGMA. And we were trying to look for an area of focus within the LGMA for that. And when we looked at it, we thought the core HR, there was a number of manual processes used are required to keep HR time and attendance up to date to ensure payment runs were met and that. So that was an area of focus for us. And really that's where we honed in for this particular funding request. With the onset of COVID, it made us rethink things a little bit. Everybody moved remotely in our office in the space of a couple of days. So that, if you like, lumped an extra workload, if you like, or burden onto our HR team, who maintained the HR time and attendance team. So we honed in on that agile working piece as the real opportunity here to help out our HR colleagues. So very much working with our HR team, we trashed out the process involved in keeping core HR up to date for all of our agile workers at the time, which was almost everybody in the organisation. We engaged with Deeper and Deloitte and partnered with Blue Prism to look at this solution. And I suppose the overall project there was three main work streams in it. One was the internal process, so very much partnering with our HR team in qualifying and documenting every single step of the process. We had Deloitte and Blue Prism who were looking on the technical solution to try and roboticize that, and our own internal IT team who kind of set up the virtual tunnel, domain access then to our local network, and that which was part of the project. So very much three separate work streams, but all interacting together. And I must say, the HR team were really the key drivers in that, because it was their process, it was their knowledge, and it was their input that brought this through the way to get a result. We'll play a small clip when I'm finished in a couple of minutes that'll really show you what the robot is doing step by step as it goes through the process of what the output is really. So it was a great piece of work there. I suppose overall, the solution we went with was a cloud-based robotic solution. And I'm using the term robotics, it's RPA or robotics process automation. They're often confused or used over each other, but just to say they're all in the one. We used a cloud-based service, which basically meant that the robot sits out in the cloud, and when the pre-programmed time comes, it basically enters through a VPN into our own local network in the LGMA, logs onto the different systems, carries out or generates its work list and carries out the work. So and then it leaves the premises again. So very much what that would aid scalability when it comes to, say, sharing that robot with other organizations. So it was a different solution, if you like, than what has been done in the past in most other organizations. And basically what the robot does is it leaves the cloud, it comes into our network, it logs into Office 365, it opens up its email address, it opens up Excel, it reads emails. From the emails, it generates a work list, it logs into core HR, it updates core HR, generates, if you like, a result list, so and it notifies HR of all the work that the robot has done. And indeed, if there's any issues with what it was asked to do, it'll highlight those for escalation to HR. And then it logs out again and goes back to rest. So I suppose it sounds simple at the end, but there was a lot of brains knocked together in the middle of the process. So really, that's a summary of what the project looked like. If there's any questions, I think it'd be great if anyone could enter them into the chat box there, or the question and answers box. I'm not sure if they're one and the same. Happy to deal with any questions at the end. We're going to run a demo now just to show you the robot in action. And I suppose the objective of this was to help our HR colleagues in dealing with that extra workload when it came to agile working. And I think we've certainly achieved that by getting this robot into operation. So Vinny, if you're happy enough to run that presentation now, I'll go on mute, and I'll just finish off when it's finished. Thanks, Vinny. So, folks, that's really, I suppose, in summary, what the project does and what the project has delivered. We still have to perfect the accent and the wording for the robot when she's speaking, but we'll work on that as a second phase. Maybe we might give it a Kildare accent. But look, overall, it's been a very positive, very positive project. We've got to know a little bit about robotics, what it can do. We solved, if you like, a problem for our HR colleagues and the extra workload that agile working has kind of presented to it. We've also, I suppose, developed something now that we feel can be scaled or offered to other organizations because of the cloud basis and the ability to share that quite easily. So really, it's we look into the future to see what happens on it. And again, if there's any questions on that specifically, happy to take them at the end here if you want to put them into the chat box. So thanks very much, folks.
Thanks a million, Eddie. And really interesting presentation. I was wondering about the accent of the robot. I was interested to know, do you have any sense of the efficiencies that have been garnered to date by introducing RPA, or is it too early? Maybe you mentioned it and I missed it at the presentation.
Yeah, I suppose it's very early. What we really wanted to do with this was a pilot test to see could we actually, interpret, if you like, the instructions coming back on the HR and the managers, and to implement that into what was a delivered solution. There's a number of applications then we could multiply that into, and that's really where you get your scale. And indeed, we're a small organization ourselves, Breda, but there's obviously a far bigger, wider organization out there in the public service. So it's about sharing that and scalability. You're on mute, Bria.
It was bound to happen at one stage. As I said earlier, our colleagues have worked on developing an RPA framework with OGP. So that's available. If you look on our website, ops.gov.ie, /innovation, you'll see our innovation hub, and there you'll see robotics as an option, and you can learn more about it and contact our colleagues Philip and John for more details if you're interested. But as Eddie said, RPA can be used across the entire public service. It's very scalable. Okay, so without further ado, we're way over, and that's my fault because of my presentation.
Just before, if I could, just to mention on that with Philip and John, they're fantastic support there on the whole robotics side. So and great people to bounce ideas off, and they're a great source of information and help there. So certainly worth talking to them on it. So
indeed, they're and John in particular, they're fantastically and hugely interested in the area. I think if Philip had his way, he'd have robots all over the public service. He probably will in time. So I just want to then move on now to
Breda,
I'm on mute again, yeah. So next up is Carmel O'Hare. Carmel is the head of Information Systems and Innovation in Monaghan County Council and chair of Monaghan County Council Innovation Team. Carmel and her team have created a 360-degree virtual house tour and also used AI embedded enabled housing inspection app. Carmel is no stranger to innovation. They're very innovative in Monaghan. This is their second year in a row. They've been successful, and Carmel has been a great friend to the innovation team and was also with the LGMA involved in the development of the innovation strategy. So you're very welcome, Carmel, and over to you.
Thanks a million, Bria, for the lovely kind words. I'm just going to share my screen now. Get my presentation up. Okay. It's not easy following those two great presentations. It's particularly Neve's there when it's very real and sensitive, and when you see the babies. But I'll give it a go anyway, because we're going across the breadth of the public sector. So as Breda has said, our project was to create a virtual reality tour creator app and a house inspection app for local authority, initially for local authority housing. However, this app can be applied and can be repurposed for any type of inspection or tour. So it can be used for tourism, for doing virtual tours for, for example, the Patrick Kavanagh Centre in Monaghan or anywhere all over the country. And you could use it for inspecting any kind of infrastructure or vehicles or anything like that. So it's very general, can be repurposed. our project had two key elements. One was the virtual reality tour, and the other was the inspection app, which worked very nicely together. I suppose the idea, just where it came from, it's kind of a lot of the time ideas start with new technology. So we find out about, oh God, there's virtual reality and there's 360-degree cameras and artificial intelligence, and how could we apply that to help us achieve efficiencies or to improve public service? So the idea of a virtual reality tour for our housing stock, the idea started and kind of got legs during a Christmas dinner, where a few drinks were taken and we got discussing it with our colleagues, and it kind of developed into an idea that we thought would be of great use. So sometimes that's how ideas can be born. They're very informal, and you just have the right people in the right room at the right time. We have a much more formal structure in place now at the moment, I have to say. We've moved on quite a bit from that. So just on the challenges and the opportunities that we were addressing. So in housing, whenever we're allocating a new house to a tenant, to a potential tenant, so we all have in local authorities, we have a housing waiting list. So the next person on the waiting list for the particular type of house, we offer them the house. In some cases, they won't even come out and look at the house because they don't like, they're not fond of the area that the house is in. And in other cases, we would bring them out to the house. It's an in-person visit, so members of staff take them out to the house and they'd have a look around, and they might refuse the house. So every house could require multiple visits. And where the virtual reality comes in, it means that the citizen can actually look at the house in the comfort of their own residence and with family and friends. And when they see how good the finish is on the house, because local authority houses are really finished very well, meeting all of the energy efficiency standards. They're better than a lot of our private houses. When they see the inside of the house, then it's much more encouraging for them. So it has significantly reduced the actual physical visits required when allocating the house. The inspection process itself was very time consuming. So what was happening was the engineers were going out for several different inspections. One was when the house became available. So when a previous tenant moves out of a house, an inspection has to be carried out to assess what level of work has to be done to get that house back into a re-let condition. Then those works are given off to a contractor to complete. The contractor has to view the house as well. Then when the work is done, the engineer comes back to do the snagging checklist again. And then finally, there's a final inspection that's carried out. So now what we have done is the engineer goes out with his 360-degree camera. So before this, he would have been taking multiple 2D photographs of every single room, which was very time consuming to upload all those photographs and index them and catalogue them and find them again. So now it's one photograph, one 360 photograph captures the entire room. So it's only one photograph per room. He has his mobile device that he captures the inspection on and the photographs on. And I'll go into that just in more detail later. But some of the opportunities on this as well was it was an opportunity to improve customer service. It was also the fact now that we have, like most citizens, practically every citizen now has a smartphone. So it's accessible now. We can send out the link to the virtual reality tour in most cases. And the final thing I think is that the new technologies are much more accessible in terms of cost and availability. So a 360-degree cameras and headsets, virtual reality headsets and artificial intelligence are now something that local authorities can take on board. Phase one of the project, which is now totally live, included what I was talking about there, the virtual reality tours, the engineers' inspections, and then it also allows us to generate an automatic report to the contractor with the work that is required. Phase two, which we're hoping, if we're really nice to the OPS and their team, they might help us fund phase two also, which would complete the project and which would be the creation of a portal for the contractor. So that would help drive our digital agenda, the local government digital agenda, and engage more the citizen and the contractor in using digital. This is some of the screenshots of the app. So there's 3 different screens there that you're looking at. The first one is where the actual project is assigned. So you can see there the list of some of the properties that have been signed and they're waiting for final inspection by the engineer. The second screenshot is an example of a property. So you can see there that this particular property is a 4-bedroom apartment and the heating type, and there's 3 bathrooms in the apartment. So that would be the front screen that the engineer will see. The app then guides him through each of the rooms in the house. It automatically guides him through them. And you can see there on the third screen there, where there's the list of the different rooms then, and he's gone into, say, bathroom 2, he or she, I should say, and the list of the items that are in that room, and he can pick then. So you can see there that he has chosen the ceiling because there's an issue with the ceiling in the bathroom. So I just wanted to kind of show briefly here how we've used artificial intelligence and voice recognition in this case. So what we've done is we have loaded in the framework contract. So I'd say this should be the same in most public sector organisations. You've had to procure your contractor to do the works for the next couple of years. And you've listed out all of the possible types of work, for example, replace the window, repair the door, plaster, whatever the different type of work is. And there's a cost for that. So the app allows us to load in that contract. And then using voice recognition, when the engineer says a keyword, for example, I think what I've demonstrated here is he's said Bell into the app. The list of tasks associated or that include Bell then are automatically made available to him. He picks whichever one it is. So for example, if it's supply and install a hardwire doorbell to the front door, and that then pulls in the cost of that work and the contractor that work will be assigned to. So it makes the inspection process much more efficient. Just in terms of the timeline of and our experience of the project, just what I wanted to say, it is a very tight timeline. And I know we're supposed to be here encouraging everybody, but I think that nobody should apply and just allow Monaghan County Council to get all the money. No, I'm joking. But what I would like to say is it is a tight timeline. So it's probably, if you have a large project, as Breda had said, if you broke it into different phases and look at a phase that you can complete within that time frame. In 2020, the fund launched at the end of January 2020. We actually submitted 2 applications by the deadline of the 26th of February. And we had, I have to say, we had great fun with the video. So we created the videos, which was an optional element added last year. And it was fun, but it does delay. So, you have to get the skates on and getting your application in. And then COVID hit with a bang then in March. And I'll cover just on the next slide some of the impacts of that. We did review the projects in light of COVID to see were they still relevant, because we knew we were in a changing world and we didn't want to proceed and develop anything that now no longer was relevant. So it was the 8th of May when we received notification of the success and failure of the application. So one was unfortunate, we didn't get funding for one of our projects. But we thankfully did get funding for the other one, and probably was a blessing in disguise because we'd never have been able to deliver on 2 in the year that was in it. So really and truly, we didn't get starting to deliver on the project until June, when we had the procurement completed. We had then the interim report to deliver on the 31st of August. Now I have to say it's not very taxing. It wasn't in that case anyway. It was just to show where you are against your milestones. So it didn't take a lot of time to do the paperwork, I have to say. On the project, we continued developing it throughout the year. The user acceptance testing began then in October, and we had the final report and the project completed by 16th of November. So we got our payment, but it is quite a tight time frame, so just to be aware of that. With COVID, I suppose COVID itself presented opportunities and challenges for us throughout the project. The first thing I have to say, which has been of huge benefit, and I know we do say it a lot and we shouldn't, is never waste a good crisis, because that's what we do in IT. We've taken the opportunity. So COVID, what it has done was really, it reinforced and highlighted the value of our solution, especially the post-reletting works and the virtual house tours, because it meant now that the citizens can see the house without the visit, because we weren't able to do visits during now as we stand with lockdown. So it has enabled that to happen. And it also meant that the engineers, when they go out on site, because of the reduction in time, they're able to do the inspection much more quicker. So COVID has actually highlighted the relevance of the project. Another thing that we've noticed is because of COVID, the pace of innovation and user adaptation to new solutions and technologies is at an all-time high. So our onboarding and user adoption and customer adoption was painless, whereas pre-COVID, that would have been a slow change management process that was totally eliminated for us. On the challenges side, I know we're not the Department of Health and HSE, a lot more challenges than ourselves, but local authorities also were busy tasked with the community call and the emergency funds, mortgage payment breaks, and multiple business restart grants. So we really were working around the clock to deliver on all of that and the project. It didn't happen within the normal working hours, I just would say so. And possibly that could be similar again this year, because I know that we're still not out of the COVID and there is more business restart grants on and the community call is still happening. So it is a commitment. One of the big downfalls as well was that we couldn't shadow our engineers when they were out doing an inspection. And that's of huge value when you're developing a solution and you're trying to pick the correct hardware for them to use. One time before, I was developing a playground inspection and I went out on site with the person that does the inspections, and they were using a tablet. They wanted a tablet, but when I went out with them, every time they had to check a piece of equipment and pull the rope, they had to put the tablet down on the ground. So it became obvious then that they either needed something around their neck or they needed like a phone that they could put in and out of their pocket. So it can be invaluable things that the person doesn't think of articulating to you. You can observe for yourself and help make the thing easy. So that was a bit of a blow. And one of the things that was really annoying, I have to say, was some of the staff's broadband was so poor and the calls were dropping and the quality of the calls at times was very frustrating. And I know we're all experiencing that, but it did, it drove me nuts at certain times. And that was it. I just wanted to thank a few people, if that's okay. My good colleague in finance, Sinead McCann, who assisted me all the way, believed in the project and managed all the financials. Nuala Woods and the housing team, who also believed in the project and who have worked tirelessly alongside us and have the engineers have taken it on board and assisted with the development. And I'd also like to thank our Chief Executive, Eamon O'Sullivan, who is, without his support at the highest level in the organisation, he's fully supportive of innovation. And of course, to Breda and her team for the public service support and for the fund. Just thanks a million for that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carmel. Excellent presentation. And I think everyone will agree what a fantastic innovation that is absolutely scalable across the sector. But I can definitely think of other ways to adapt for other sectors within the public service. So interesting to hear from you, Carmel, about how COVID impacted. And of course, needless to say, COVID impacted lots of our frontline workers, and the local authorities did a tremendous job in terms of being there for the community and for those very vulnerable, and all of the different initiatives. Myself and the team have collated, and it's going a little slower than anticipated, but collated innovation stories. So public servants and how they responded to the pandemic. And the one thing we're seeing is that a lot of these innovations actually were developed pre-COVID and were able to be then dialed up quickly in response. So interestingly, as Carmel said, couldn't have anticipated a pandemic and the adoption rate and how it changed, and that's so interesting. But then at the same time, not having to be able to watch that user and how they interact with the technology, for example, to improve, which is unfortunate in the times we live in at the moment. But absolutely fantastic, Carmel. There are some innovations happening up in Monaghan, I have to say. So well done to Carmel and her team. Oops. Next up, we'll hear from Robert Murphy. Robert is a health and behavioural economist working in the Research Services and Policy Unit of the Department of Health. Robert works to support the use of research evidence across the department and leads on the application of behavioural science to health policy and implementation. Robert's project sought to reduce the numbers that just simply don't turn up to hospital appointments. So really important project here. Over to you, Robert. You're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Breda, and it's been fantastic to see all the really interesting presentations. So as Breda mentioned, this project was looking at reducing non-attendance or DNAs for hospital outpatient appointments. And we wanted to try to do that by increasing patient engagement, not by introducing regulations or incentives, but just trying to provide extra information or reframe the information that's provided on invites. So one question really is is this, what was the driver to the project? Was it a problem or an opportunity? And it was really both. I think when you're looking at innovation in public sector, it's around kind of identifying a challenge or a problem and see how an innovation can help in relation to that. So obviously acute hospitals are a crucial part of the health service, and it's where the sickest patients receive treatment. And accounts for around 30% of spend across the OECD. But a significant problem is that a considerable proportion of people do not attend their appointment, and they don't cancel it. And that's not a good use of resources for patients, staff time, or expenditure. So the opportunity really is that good communication is a key part of the patient's journey through the system. And the point at which an appointment offer is sent is a key milestone. So that's when someone's been on a waiting list for a period of time, and then they receive a letter and it's saying you have an appointment in 4 weeks' time. And it's about really how that information is conveyed and how it's presented. So you'll see then on the next slide, what we really wanted to do is we wanted to reduce that amount of DNAs. So about 15% of appointments were resulting in non-attendance, of almost 500,000 patients a year not attending. Now, international evidence has shown that SMS reminders or text reminders, if you adjusted the actual wording of those, you could reduce DNAs. And there was evidence from that in Australia and England. So we wanted to do that, but do it in an Irish context. And what we also wanted to do was to amend that initial patient offer letter that goes out about 4 weeks in advance to see if we could reduce DNAs too. That had never been done anywhere before in the world. We had done it as a project on the inpatient side, but it hadn't been done on the outpatient side. So we worked with Outpatients Communications Group with representatives from the Department of HSE and the National Treatment Purchase Fund. And our target was really to get DNAs down. And even if we could reduce DNAs non-attenders from every 1 out of 10 non-attenders, you'd be talking about nearly 50,000 more patient appointments attending a year. So in terms of, look at the next slide then, in terms of how we, the context to this and what makes it innovative. This was our 2020 project, but the context was it was part of a wider initiative referred to as the Better Letter Initiative. And that involves redesigning patient communication processes and correspondence to engage patients better in the waiting list management and appointment offers. And what makes it innovative really is that it's looking at really kind of simplifying the process and the language used in correspondence, using behavioral design elements to increase engagement, and then testing redesigned correspondence against existing correspondence using randomized controlled trials, so in the field testing, and that allows you to attribute causation to any differences you make. And it was a very close collaboration between the Department of Health, 2 agencies in terms of the Health Service Executive, the National Treatment Purchase Fund, hospital sites, and then an advisory group where we have behavioural scientists and representatives from NALA involved. So it's around citizen engagement from the point of view of design, process and communication improvement, and behavioural insights. So just moving on in terms of, just to give you a sense of the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact. So the main output really was that we redesigned the SMS reminder messages that are sent and agreed on ones that would be tested in the field. And we did the same for the appointment offer letter. So typically someone will receive an appointment offer letter maybe 4 weeks in advance of their appointment, and then 3 to 4 days before that date, then they'll receive an SMS reminder. So we agreed on a redesign of that. And then the key bits really where the Public Service Innovation Fund came in was in relation to, well, how do we test? How do we know which one of these will work best? Well, it actually works best. So the Innovation Fund, what it allowed us to do, it allowed us to add functionality to the IT system in Naas General Hospital, which was the participating test hospital. So it allowed it to create multiple messages to be stored on the system and issued over the same time period to patients. But it also then involved linkages, so data linkage. So the IT or software development enabled their system to connect the particular message that was sent with the subsequent attendance. And that was the key deliverable in terms of expenditure over the project. And what this means that as data is now gathered, there's a sense of automation in terms of the data gathering. So over this year, as the data is gathered, where the different invitations are sent out, staff can automatically generate a report, which was so for each individual, the type of message they received, and then whether they attended or not, or cancelled or not, and so on. And we would be able to test that in terms of the existing communications used and the redesigned letters and SMS. So in terms of how we went about it, I'll come to that in a minute, but I guess a big impacts part of this project is almost will be the numbers that we can say we've reduced DNAs by X amount. But I guess it's positive to note that our experience was that we did have a more kind of qualitative impact during the year, during 2020. So it really stimulated positive energy within the department, the NTBF and the HSE, and it showed that these type of qualitative improvement projects can take place even during really, really kind of challenging times. The longer term impacts will be that the type of innovation, it's very kind of extremely cost effective and scalable. It's really talking about amending an existing mechanisms that are there. And we suspect that it will make it clearer for patients and reduce DNAs. And if that's the case, it will be adopted as a national template that's recommended for all hospitals to use in terms of their reminders and for appointment offer letters. So in terms of our approach, 3 main bits: conclusive testing, close collaboration, and inclusive design. In terms of conclusive testing then, what we were able to do is use randomized controlled trials. So for example, there's a group of patients who are ready to be offered a letter to come in for an appointment in 4 weeks. That can be split into 2 groups. Some will go into the control group, which will receive the existing letter. Others will go into the intervention group, which will receive the redesigned letter. And then we will automatically know the outcome on attendance day. And where we can then, if we're able to see that actually more people attended that received the intervention, we can attribute that or causation to the new design. So in terms of how we designed the material, we had a really, really close collaboration. We're a bit short for time, so I won't call out all the individuals, but it was a really close collaboration between our team, our advisory group, National Treatment Purchase Fund, the HSE, the participating hospital, and the IT provider. All really worked really well together on the project in terms of identifying a solution. We had a really inclusive design process in terms of review of all the relevant literature, review of previous trials, iterative process of going through different versions of the suggested thinking material to be tested, engaging with the staff in Naas General Hospital, NTBF, IT provider, and public representative. And then just to give you a sense of the type of material that will be tested then. So you'll see on the next slide the existing type of message that's used in terms of an SMS reminder. It won't be bolded when we test, but at the moment that's how they present it, it's bolded. So a certain amount of people receive message 1. Message 2 then, in terms of when we look at the redesigns, has an element of personalization. So, get people's attention in terms of Robert, reciprocity in terms of we're expecting you at your appointment. And then just the day. So it's quite a practical thing in terms of enabling people to recall their appointments, to give them the day rather than just the date. And one of the main reasons from the literature when people are asked why didn't they attend internationally, it's because they actually forgot. So that's our next redesign message 3. It's the same as message 2, but then it just gives it more practical information like the clinic ID. So it's physiotherapy. So it's easy for people to remember, yeah, actually it's Thursday, I have my physiotherapy appointment. The 4th one then stresses it adds into it the importance for their health. So again, when people are asked why they don't attend internationally, they say, I didn't really see the benefit of it. So it just has an added sentence in there stating attending means you're looking after your health. And then the 5th one It's the same as message 3, but it also adds in avoided loss to patient and staff. So if you cannot attend or have any COVID-19 symptoms, please phone the number. Let us know now so that we can give you an appointment to another patient. So the idea is to test which one of those will work best, and we'll know that, and then we'll be able to recommend it. In terms of the existing letter designs, then you'll see on the left as you view the screen, the existing letter that's sent out, and there's a lot of information on that. So there's information about people's appointment date, what to do before your appointment, what to do when you arrive, questions about COVID, and so on. So what the redesign does is it focuses on simplifying the key actions, and the key action is really to please note your appointment date. So we have that as a call for action in the letter. Again, we use personalization in terms of, it'll be, dear Robert, I have booked you an appointment. Try to make it really salient in terms of the date to help people recall that. And then it sets up the kind of expectation. We are looking forward to seeing you. And then it refers to a preparation note. So a lot of the detail will come on a separate page rather than all being squished into the one page, essentially. So it refers to preparation notes, which contains instructions for the appointment and safety measures for COVID-19. And then, and I haven't shown that, the preparation note today. And then it also stresses the importance for the health and avoided loss, a kind of reassurance and expectation again. And then at the end, it has a commitment device, which has been shown in other designs to help, where people just write down the date, cut it off, and stick it somewhere on the fridge. Finally, then, in terms of just some reflections in terms of what was tricky with the project and what particularly helped. So by definition, when you start a project like this, you're asking already busy people to do more. So you just need to kind of think through that and how you're going to pitch it and what's the real added value. And you're also kind of marrying technical aspects with practical considerations. So you're going into, you know, a hospital and you're trying to figure out how are we going to run a randomized controlled trial in terms of correspondence and communications within the existing system. And then the pandemic obviously was a major factor, and it's real testament to the staff and the hospitals involved that in Eastern Hospital that they continued on with this project right through that. So you'd have meetings where we'd have a scheduled meeting, and their meeting prior to that, they were talking about how they would totally reorganize the flow of patients in the hospital, but yet they stuck with this project throughout it. So in terms of facilitators, the key thing really is you need people who are prepared to do something different. And in the public sector, doing anything different in a way means taking a risk. So we had that at department level, we had it at HSE and the NTPF and the hospital. Really, really important thing when you meet challenges or obstacles is around kind of focusing on the objectives. And in this case, it was better outcomes for patients. So how will this work better for the patient? Better, they will be clearer understanding, they're more likely to attend. And ultimately, it's a better use of staff time. And that'll apply nationally if it's proved that the best template to use. It was also helpful. There is some administrative extra work associated with the fund, but so it can be helpful to distribute that across your organisation and with collaborators if you can. So I know it was really useful. Colleagues on my side on the scheduled care and performance unit looked after a lot of the funding aspects, and colleague Alva Powell in the NTPF looked after a lot of the administration and setting up meetings and so on. It's really useful as well to focus on the fund deadlines from the start. Because it is quite tight, as been mentioned already, in terms of mid-November, and kind of have that at your mind at the start and during discussions and negotiation. It's a fact we have to have this done by that date, or we don't get the money. So that can be quite persuasive at times. Relationships and communications are key, so too is flexibility. The expertise we had in the project was invaluable right across the people involved directly, and then the IT side, and patient advocates and behavioural sciences and so on. And then automation. So this project wouldn't have been possible without the funding, because the funding allowed us to automate this, to send the different messages and record them, but to automate the production of the outcomes. And if that wasn't there, the project, I can safely say with the pandemic, would have just stopped, because it wouldn't have been feasible for staff to collect the outcomes. And then I guess another big thing is knowing that the results will be acted upon. So this followed on from 2 previous projects where we redesigned material, they worked better, and then they were adapted nationally. So knowing that your material is likely to be scaled up is a big positive too. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Robert. Super presentation. Incredibly important area, behavioural insights and economics. And I think we've seen that and how that's been brought to bear during the COVID pandemic in response, and with the Department of Health and working with the ESRI. And there's their website, the ESRI.ie website, is fantastic to see some of the studies and the work that was some of the papers available in terms of the COVID response. But this is an important area that can be used in every single public sector organisation. We've come a long way since I started off as a CEO writing letters in the Department of Business back in the day, where we were concerned with font type and such. And actually to look at this and to really think about the users and how people react to interventions, and particularly around scarce resources. So incredibly important project, Robert. Well done, and thanks a million for sharing. So last but not least, this is one of my personal favourites. I can see the application for our own section. Grania Curtin works in the communication unit in the policing authority, where her responsibilities include stakeholder management. So her project aimed to encourage wider, more meaningful engagement with individual citizens through public consultation on policing priorities. So Grania has used software to enable an interactive consultation whereby the consultee has a finite number of points to allocate to various areas that they consider a policing priority. So you're very welcome, Grania. Over to you.
Authority.prioritysimulator.com to get started. This project was funded by the Department of Public Expenditure.
Over to you, Grania.
Thanks, guys. Can I share my screen?
Yep. Should be able to now.
Great. Thank you, Vinny. Great. Thanks, guys. So as you just heard, policing priorities set out the most important things that the Garda Síochána are directing their efforts and resources to in any one year. So the policing authority has responsibility for establishing policing priorities each year, and it's from this then that the Garda Commissioner will develop his policing plan for the year. So one of the steps in developing the policing priorities is a public consultation. So in the past, we have found that the vast majority of responses to our public consultations have come from the likes of NGOs, civil society organisations, and other non-statutory and statutory stakeholders. While these submissions are meaningful and valuable, I suppose what we felt like they lacked was input from individual citizens. So what we were looking to do was to reach beyond these organisations to give individual citizens an opportunity to have their say on these important policing matters. We also wanted to achieve this without creating too much of a burden for ourselves in terms of analysis. So what we set out to do was to produce more tangible data on the views of the public, which will inform the work of the authority, to make our public engagement more interactive and accessible, to develop communications materials which are simple and accessible, to run a pilot that can be scaled up to a larger project, and to use the skills within the organisation to the greatest effect possible. The solution came in the form of the simulator. This is a piece of off-the-shelf software from a UK company called DLib. It is called Prioritization Deliberation Software. It's fully responsive. I'm going to do a quick demonstration at the end of the presentation, but put simply, the consultee is presented with a list of policing priorities. They are given a finite amount of points that they can spend on their priorities, or what they see as priorities. And of course, as we all know, resources are finite, not everything can be a priority. So difficult decisions need to be made. So there's kind of an education piece as well there for the consultee to kind of understand the difficult decisions that have to be made. So the software was actually developed by gamers. So I think it has this kind of fun element to it as well. I think it does anyway. We carried out a pilot in September of last year using the Joint Policing Committees as a test audience. So JPCs are a partnership platform of local authorities, guards and community representatives. The simulator also has the option of attaching a short survey. So for the purpose of the pilot, we used the survey to gather user feedback. The pilot ran for 2.5 weeks. We had 224 responses from 29 of the 31 JPCs. So the user feedback was very positive. You can see there 86% agreed or strongly agreed that the process was user-friendly, and 97% said they were likely or very likely to respond again to something similar in the future. So while the pilot was small in scale, we can scale that up now. Our plan is to use the simulator for a large-scale public consultation this year to help us to determine the policing priorities for 2022. And we're expecting a significant revision of the policing priorities for 2022 because the guards are also entering a new strategy period next year as well. We very much hope that this tool, along with a strong communications campaign, will help us to reach citizens across a large diversity of communities. Of course, this project has the potential to be replicated in lots of different areas of the public sector, anywhere that there are conflicting priorities, where input from citizens is desired. So I think even deeper we're looking into it at the moment. So yeah, it's definitely very transferable. I just wanted to briefly touch on budget. So our project was on the lower end of the funding scale here. We were awarded a total of €12,000. The software comes on a subscription basis. So the 1-year subscription is around €6,000 plus VAT. And we were also funded to develop communications materials. So that included the animated video that you saw at the start of the presentation. And I was just thinking about maybe what might be helpful to you in developing your application. I think for me, one of the keys to unlocking this idea was realizing that I didn't necessarily need to invent something new. So our colleagues in the Northern Irish Policing Board and the Policing Service of Northern Ireland carried out a big public consultation in 2018 using this software. So that's where the idea came from. I didn't reinvent the wheel. Also, give them what they ask for. I felt when I was filling out the application last year that it was quite explicit in what it was looking for. So there were things like transferability and scalability, and I think it's really worth putting the thought into how you can offer that with your proposal. And then finally, ask around. I think it's important to brainstorm all over the organization if you can. With this kind of thing, you don't really know where the idea is going to come from. It could come from anywhere. So I think get people from all over the organization in the room for a brainstorm if you can. And then finally, just by way of demonstration, I just put together a quick screen recording. So if you don't mind, Vinny, you can roll that there, just so that you can kind of see the simulator in action.
coming up now.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a number of 4 areas of policing on the left-hand side, and then within each area of policing, there are a number of policing priorities. Each priority also has a little information button, which gives a little bit of background on what it means. And then each priority has a sliding scale from 1 to 5. So you can just work your way down through the priorities and allocate the points as you see fit. At the top of the screen, you can see at any one time how much you've spent and how much you have remaining. Now, obviously, in reality, you'd be given careful consideration to every one of these. So now we can see we've gone into minus. Oh no, we don't have enough resources to go around. We have to go back and make some difficult choices because you can't finish it out until your balance is at 0. So now we're done. We've spent our 70 points. So that's it. I think a little bit of the quality is lost in the recording, but it does actually in reality have a really nice interface. So that's great. Thank you very much for listening, and look out for our consultation in May. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Grania. I am a big fan of this tool, and I'm trying to persuade the powers that be, my boss in public service reform, to look at this kind of simulator for the next we're developing the next round of the next public service plan, and I think it would be a great way to engage public servants, because we can't do everything. There's always limits in terms of budgets and resources, so I think it's a fantastic way to engage, and as you said, that gaming technology, and I think it would be very quick as well. It seems like a much quicker way of engaging than long surveys and stuff. So well done, fantastic project. We've gone way over, but we have loads of questions in, and Vinny and Dean are going to ask a few questions to our great speakers, but just I see a few relating to the fund that I might just quickly answer while Dean and Vinny are coming up with or collating those questions. I see, how many applications did we get in 2019? 140. Kira also asked about 2020, 364. So huge number, just over 500. Can an LA local authority submit numerous applications? Yes, they can. We can't tell you what you can and can't do, but you can submit your heart's content. The only thing I would say is that I know many organizations maybe thought of a different strategy for the second year, that they didn't want to compete with themselves. So that might be something you can consider. Will my presentation be available? Yes, we'll do a link to that. I think there was a question about the video. So we added the video piece in last year. It's still optional for this year. The same kind of thing applies. You can do a quick 2-minute on your phone. It just allows other people that aren't necessarily maybe they want to communicate their project in a different way. So you don't get extra points. You're not, penalized for not including it, but it's a nice way to explain, particularly a more complicated project. And the videos, that's brilliant, but there's many projects who got through who didn't have videos, so don't worry about that. So I'll pass over, I don't know, Vinny, do you want to jump in first with the question? Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I don't want to hang out Dean. I was actually collecting all the questions here, so he mightn't have any in case you flick back to him. I had a few questions for Dean. I might pose a few questions, let the speakers think about it, and then I'll come back to you for an answer. I'll actually start off with Breda. Someone did ask, was there any point in submitting applications that were rejected last year? A few people asked that, so and is there feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. Unless we came back to you and said, give you very bad feedback, but generally the reason why people didn't get funded is because we didn't have enough money to give you. 9% projects were excellent, absolutely excellent, but it is a competition and it's highly competitive. If we gave constructive comments, maybe it'd be useful to look at those comments and see how to amend your application. I would say we did get a few from, say, schools looking for AstroTurf, and we don't support that kind of project, so we don't want to encourage people to send in those kind of projects. It has to be innovative and so on. So I don't want to waste your time. It's not a capital grants project, you know, or a fund. So so yeah, absolutely, you can send them in, but look at it in terms of, you know, do you need to make amendments to try and improve it? Thanks.
Yeah, a few questions here for Eddie. So if you want to think about these, what type of work does the robot typically do? And did you consider Microsoft RPA solution? And then a question for Niamh. You might mention again the app that you use in your presentation. A few people interested to hear. And did you prepare the application on work time? It must have taken you a lot of time, is a question here for Niamh. And Carmel, how does the system communicate with iHouse? Can this system automatically update iHouse with inspection reports? So maybe just as you're thinking about those answers, I just do want to let people know, as Breda mentioned, all the slides will be shared. Please contact us at innovation@per.gov.ie to sign up for the network to receive all updates from today, but future events as well. Someone had asked about the RPA with our colleagues John and Philip. If you email rpa@per.gov.ie, you can contact the guys there. They're really helpful. And then it wasn't mentioned today, but there has been an innovation strategy launch recently, and the next innovation workshop on that will take place on the 25th of February. So contact hilary.dolan@per.gov.ie for information on that. So I might go back to Eddie, if you had a chance to think about it. Maybe what kind of work does the robot typically do, and did you consider Microsoft RPA solution?
Thanks, Vinny. Well, firstly, we didn't consider Microsoft, so we worked within the framework that Deepa had put together there. So basically, there's three options there: Blue Prism, NICE, and UiPath, and we went with Blue Prism as part of that framework. My understanding is that Microsoft are getting into the space, and I'm sure like a lot of what Microsoft do will be quite good, but at the time we didn't. It wasn't really an option for us. With regard to what the robot can do, I suppose, look, it can do anything. You know, if the process is stable, if the source information, and that was one thing we had to do with our project in that, and I think I saw a question coming up there in the chat about what kind of information did the manager submit to HR. Well, we developed as part of the improvement process to start the project, we actually developed an Excel spreadsheet, and we locked down the different fields. So the data was coming in a very regular, a very consistent manner, and then it was easy for the robot then to interpret that. So there was no, there was no confusion there or mixed messages for the robot. So that's very important. But I suppose every process needs to be looked at individually to see if the robot can follow through on the different actions that are required. But really, it's huge scope there. It's huge scope.
Smashing. Thanks so much. Might move back over to Niamh then. Just can you maybe name the app again? And then the second part of the question was, did you prepare the application during work time? And obviously, judging by your presentation, I obviously think that a lot of work went into it. So it's a reflection of your project.
Question, it's called Balsamic. You basically, if you put wireframe into Google, you'll find something. The one I use is balsamic.com. And as I said, it's literally like Paint for kind of coding, just dragging and dropping pictures and different things. So that's useful. And then I suppose the second question, I think I probably spent more time on this than my degree. It was very time consuming. I suppose what I didn't mention was the lead in to prior to applying for the fund. I'd done a lot of collaborative work in terms of idea generation. I had the opportunity to present at a Microsoft hackathon. So the project was quite built, I suppose, before we kind of went for the funding. So that was a large kind of part of it done. And then throughout it, I would definitely encourage everyone to make sure that their senior organisers or their management and executives are on board, because that facilitated my CEO to offer 0.4 of a WTE dietitian and backfill for me. So I was somewhat seconded to this project for kind of in around 6 months. On top of that, there was additional work, but I really enjoyed it, so I didn't really mind. So yeah, I definitely would just encourage individuals that are applying that they do have the background from their own organisation to support them within their work.
Perfect. And just sorry to get to a few of the comments out there as well. I know Neve's project hit a chord with many people. Marie said, great project, Neve, really highlights the value element of innovation. And Jacqueline said, well done, Neve, fantastic project. As a software developer and a mum of preterm twins, I appreciate the work done on both sides. So lovely to hear great messages of support for your project. Might skip over to Carmel then. A question then, does the system communicate with iHouse, and can the system automatically update iHouse with inspection reports?
Phase one, we've developed it in 2 phases. So in phase one, there is a one-way interface from iHouse into the application, in that all the properties that the council owns are available in the application to be assigned as projects. So phase 2, we will interface with iHouse the other way. Now, we haven't just worked that through yet. It can be via SQL scripts, but we have to get support from the third-party service provider that won't break the service level agreement. Alternatively, we could go to Eddie and get one of his bots to do that for us, because that would be just screen level integration, so that won't impact on any service level agreement. And maybe that's a joint collaboration project that we could do for the sector. Eddie, maybe we could collaborate on that one. That's phase 2, and it's just not fully planned out yet.
Excellent. And then maybe a general question for if Robert or Grania wanted to jump in, or even Anne. Someone was just asking, how does one determine estimate budget for their application? So did you go out and test the market first, or did you kind of use rough approximations, and how close maybe were you to them? It's just, I suppose, someone thinking along the lines of applying and how you estimated your budgets. Might ask Robert to jump in if he can.
Yeah, it's an important question. It's important to have a realistic budget. So in our case, there was an incumbent provider already, in the hospital. There was only one kind of provider that could do the work. So we'd asked for some quotes in advance of making the submission. So we were fairly well informed from that point of view.
Can I just add, it can be very difficult, and I know some work, the fact is the innovation, hasn't been done before. So you might be lucky and you might be able to communicate to some providers or whatever. And in other cases, Eddie, I'm looking at you, it may not be as evident how much the thing will cost, right? So, but you have to try and just do your best. And actually tidied up how we presented that information from the first year to the second year. And it's really helpful, Anne, isn't it, to know if we can, I suppose that we're assured the projects can develop.
Yeah, because as part of Deeper, unfortunately, we have to tie into a circular 13, I think it's 2014, and it's a requirement to produce all quotations for capital equipment. If we want them, we will ask for 3 quotations. So I mean, that's a requirement, and anything over 25,000, there is a tender, requirement there, and I have to ensure that that tender was carried out properly and the right, so a tender number has to be provided to Deeper so that we check that everything was above board. So it's quite there's strict procurement requirements for grants in any organisation, and especially within Deeper. So
and can I just also add something Vinny said earlier about, or it was Neve actually getting senior buy-in. So all project applications need to be signed off by PO, civil service, it would be PO level or equivalent. So in the guidelines, you'll see what the equivalent is in your sector at that level. And that's a way of us ensuring that there is at least a certain amount of commitment there from the senior management, and a project application will be invalid if it doesn't have that signature of, and it can be electronic signature, obviously, for the times we live in, but there has to be that senior buy-in.
Yeah, we've there was actually a point here kind of made, which isn't a bad one, from Neil, who was I don't like when people say when projects are rejected, they're not being rejected. It's just, unfortunately, as Breda said, we don't have the funding to fund all of them. I'd say if we had 20 million, we still probably wouldn't have enough to cover everyone. So I hate when people use the word rejected, but say the applications that weren't successful, and they were similar to other projects, would it be a good idea to put them in contact with each other and maybe they could pool resources? And I suppose that is a great idea, Neil, and possibly if the new team coming in could collate the projects that are very similar and maybe put them in contact with each other. Yeah, that's a great idea for pooling resources. Did anyone of the panelists have any issues addressing data security using cloud-based solutions? I know maybe Neve maybe had issues with that possibly, and how you overcome them.
So I suppose it depends on kind of where you host it. So the HSE has kind of a hosting framework called Azure, and that's kind of the target audience or the target location that we hope to host the pnplus.ie. But because as I said in my presentation, it's not certified yet, so therefore it's just kind of hosted locally. But that is something that we're considering. So to, I suppose, overcome that throughout the whole process, I've included the DPIA both locally here in Limerick and also in Crumlin, because it's a separate section. So it's just important, I suppose, to support the user and also the subjects that you would be including in it. Yeah.
And Vinny, if I just might come in on that too, our bot, if you like, is hosted in the cloud, but all the work it does and all the instructions and all the data it sees is when it comes into our LAN and does all the work in our space, if you like, and then it leaves the LGMA to go back out to the cloud, leaving all data behind. So there's no data leaving our network or our systems. So we're good that way.
That's how you're managing that end. Maybe I might ask Grania then. It's a general question about maybe cost versus savings made. Have you been able to quantify or estimate, say, some of the details regarding the cost of your project, and then hopefully the future savings made based on the application you've come up with?
I suppose this kind of reaching out to individual citizens isn't something we have been able to do at all before, so therefore we wouldn't have costs associated with it. But I do think, like, it is really good bang for our buck in terms of the subscription service. I mean, it's 12 months for €6,000, so I do feel like it's low budget but high impact. But yeah, we don't have anything to compare it with, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I suppose a great advantage for you is that you're actually reaching out to the public and asking them for their input. It can be very difficult for public service organizations to have direct contact with the public, and then, say, from a civil service point of view, it can be even harder again because you might be one step removed. So have you found then that this has completely opened up, changed the rule book nearly with how you interact with the public?
Yeah, a total game changer. Yeah, and we're hoping, to work with our existing stakeholders so that they can reach out then to their networks and their members. So, the communications element of it is going to be huge as well. But yeah, the tool is a total game changer for us, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and as Breda mentioned, the gamification of it as well can be applicable to any department that is struggling to figure out, well, how do we reach out into the public and ask for their opinion in a controlled and in a controlled environment as well, where it's not just here, there, and everywhere. Like the idea then of the point system is great then, because people have to make the hard decisions and realize that there is a lot of thought process that goes in behind all decisions that are made, although they mightn't feel like it all the time.
Yeah, so there is an education element there to it as well. Yeah, it's very exciting.
I think, Dean, did you find a question in the comment section?
Yeah, I just have a question here for Breda or Anne, if they could answer. It's from John O'Shaughnessy. It has the Public Service Innovation Team approved funding or sponsorship to a new aspect of a project that was previously funded. For example, if you completed a project from a different round of funding and you want to expand or improve upon it, is this considered under the new fund, or do the guidelines kind of prohibit it?
Bob, you're on mute.
It's always me. Yeah, I might take that, Dean. Thanks. Maybe Anne wants to jump in. I wonder, is that Dr. John O'Shaughnessy from FSI? Okay, who is incidentally a speaker at our next webinar on the 11th of Feb, but I'll get to that shortly. So absolutely, you can apply for a different phase. So that's what we're really encouraging. I think what we've experienced since starting the fund is that maybe people try to do too much in 1 year and spend the money, because there's a lot of rigidity around spending the money, and spending the money to us means you know, you've got the invoices and you've paid them and it's gone through your financial system and you've transaction reports and all of that kind of stuff. So that's the level. It's not sort of, you know, the whole thing needs to be paid and whatever. But yeah, absolutely, John. You know, second phases. So you might do a proof of concept or something at the start in year 1, and then year 2 might be some sort of implementation, and then year 3 it could be scaling the innovation. So absolutely, we welcome all those kinds of applications. And while I'm at it, I'll just say, so we're delighted the next webinar on the 11th of Feb at 11 a.m. and many of you have already signed up to that. The registration for these webinars have been huge. And we had a tough time even just trying to look at projects to represent on these 3 webinars, because the projects we've funded have just been super, as you can see today, the colleagues here. So for the next one we have Enterprise Ireland, CIT, St Finbarr's Hospital, Citizens Information Board, and Forensic Science Ireland, and we're really looking forward to that one. So same time, same place next week, but obviously register. But Anne, I don't know if you want to jump in about another phase of a project, or have I covered it all?
Well, background that I'm in, I mean, I came from the research and innovation team in Enterprise Ireland, so there was always different phases and iterations of projects, and they all had different names. So there was proof of concept, and there'd be another level, and then like obviously out the scaling side of it as well. So yes, I'd like to see that happening with our innovation fund in the future, and I'd look forward to reading what comes in next, and it'd be great to see some of the projects we've already seen in the last 2 years, you know, come back to us with their competing goals and milestones. Thanks.
So I might just go around the house with one final question before Breda might want to sum up, because I know we've kind of blasted right through the time. Thanks for everyone that's stuck with us today. So the final question, just would the panelists be able to give an idea how much funding that was provided them for each project? So I'll just kind of go in order of my screen. So Carmel, if you want to go first, maybe.
Yeah, we were very fortunate and we received €29,900 funding, which covered the full cost of our project. There was no cost to the local authority.
Perfect. And then Eddie?
We received 15,000, Vinny. Now, we didn't cover the cost of developing the solution, but it was a good help to getting us there.
Thank you so much. And Niamh?
We received 50,000, so it was excellent to get a good chunk of that to support a lot of the development.
And Grania?
Yeah, so we were awarded €12,000. So the cost of the software subscription for 12 months was €6,000 plus VAT, and then the remainder was spent on communications materials.
Well, and then finally, Robert?
So we received slightly over around kind of 20,000, and it covered all of the costs. We wouldn't like to go into it. It's kind of some commercial sensitivities there in a way, but it covered all of the costs of the project.
Amazing. So you can kind of, I hope the audience can see that there's such an array of awards given out, and the impact then can differ from a very low figure can have huge impact, and then a very high figure could be the start of a project. So there's definitely there's enough there for everybody to get involved in the fund, and to certainly put in an application and test the water and see where you could maybe, if unsuccessful due to funding, maybe you could go again next year with a more beefed out project. But I hope today was certainly informative and gave people some inspiration for their applications, which has gone live today. And certainly for myself, I want to wish you best of luck. And I look forward to seeing all the applications coming in, and I might hand back to Breda maybe.
Thanks so much, Vinny. Yeah, this is a really fun time for us. I can't tell you how thrilling it is to see the ideas that we know are out there in the system, in the public service. You know, a lot of people have told us, say in certain organizations that like maybe have bigger budgets or whatever, don't necessarily need money, but the idea of winning an award has given them kind of a way to kind of open up conversations in their organization as well. So there's other benefits apart from the monetary piece, but obviously the monetary piece is important. So I just want to again thank Niamh, Eddie, Carmel, Robert and Grania. Fantastic presentations. They'll all be made available afterwards in addition to my own. And this is actually being recorded, and hopefully all going well, we'll pop this up on the website as well. I want to do also a big thank you to my own team, Vinny and Dean, and also Catherine, who is gone off just to study. As you know, this is our last hurrah. This is our last funding call, where our secondment is nearly up. We'll be gone in May and June this year. So we'll start you on this road, and a new team will come in to bring it then to conclusion. We're doing the nice bit. We're giving out the awards, and they'll have to harass you for all the documentation and so on at the end of the year. But we've had an absolute blast, and it's just such a great job to have. It's a great fun. This stuff is fun, you know. It's really interesting, and it's great to you know, particularly if you've been around the block like myself in civil service departments for a while, and you know, you've all these things niggling at you that you'd love to change. This is your opportunity. Work with colleagues, get senior management buy-in, and submit your application. A lot of people have told us as well, particularly in the first year, they were like, oh, I'm not sure if this really is innovation, and they were successful. So, you know, you might have your own doubts, but just get the application. You certainly won't win if you don't have the application in. So submissions again, deadline is the 24th of February at 12 noon. Available. Contact us if you have any questions. Again, register for the next event, because we'll have a host of different 5 different stories, as I said, from EI, CIT, Finbarr's Hospital, Citizens Information Board, and FSI, and we're really looking forward to seeing you there. So thanks a million. Bye everyone.